Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Healing Doesn't Have to Be Heavy podcast. I'm so excited to have you with us today. I'm Angie Berrett, and I am a trauma informed coach. I'm a play expert, I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also a child abuse survivor. I now help women use movement and play to connect to their bodies, releasing limiting self beliefs, stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma. And for me, as I was on my healing journey from child abuse, I felt like things were so heavy. I felt like I was in this pit of despair and I didn't see much hope or much lightness out there. And so now that I'm where I am on my journey, I want to provide a light and a beacon and hope for other women who are on their healing journey wherever they are. And so this podcast is an opportunity to bring together amazing, amazing resources, people who have their own stories to share and who have incredible insight and knowledge and resources to bring to you. And I'm so excited to bring you today's guest. She is fantastic and her voice is just so incredibly soothing. I can't wait for y'all to meet her. Plus, she has some really valuable knowledge. But before we do that, I just want to give a slight trigger warning or a little trigger warning. We are going to be talking about child abuse, narcissistic abuse, sexual assault. So if you find that you're starting to get triggered, definitely step away, ground down into yourself, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And then I definitely invite you when you feel ready to come back and to listen because our guest today has some really interesting insights, knowledge, and resources that you might not be aware of you could be utilizing on your healing journey. So let me introduce y'all to Penny Barron. And Penny, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Angie. And I just have to say, I love the name of your podcast, Healing Doesn't Have to Be Heavy. I just think it's awesome, and we need more of that out there.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm so excited that you're here to share your nuggets of information with us on how to go about a healing journey so that it doesn't have to be heavy. So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, so my life started out pretty heavy, actually. Sexual abuse from a very young age that went for a long time, and my parents didn't know how to deal with it. So you can imagine by the time I got to teenagehood, I was a bit of a mess and I was acting up and being, just a little shithead, as you do. My first experience with sex was a rape. So that kind of dug me in even deeper to that whole trauma thing. And I come from a very chaotic, well, emotionally chaotic background. Not so much physically, like I did grow up in a bit of a white picket fence sort of neighborhood, people riding bikes in the cul-de-sac type of things. So at the time, that was kind of almost gaslighting for me because I was like, well, what do you mean? My parents are, relatively well off. We go on all these beautiful family holidays. And this is what they'd tell me as well because I was ungrateful. What's wrong with you? Kind
Right.
of, you've got everything you could possibly want. Anyway, so I got to about 17 and I had some friends who were probably a little bit toxic and a boyfriend who was very toxic, but I all I wanted to do was get away and escape from the house. And I got into drinking and a little bit of pot. And my parents thought the worst and they thought I was on heroin, which I wouldn't even know how to get it. And
Right.
they staged this kind of intervention, I guess you could call it in inverted commas, where they forced me to stay home and study maths and do all this maths coaching. And they saved me. And they almost lost me because I was suicidal back then. And I hit, as you say earlier, when you were telling your story, I hit rock bottom. And my family are very kind of conservative, mainstream, very scientific. And so, what I found when I was trying to kind of work out, actually, the first time I ever thought I can change all that heavy shit about myself was in my very early 20s. I came across a Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. There was this thing in there that said something like, you can choose to change, you can choose to forgive. And even if it wasn't at forgiveness point by then, because I was still full of rage, but you can choose to move on and you can choose to heal and change yourself. And I was like, whoa, nobody ever told me this. And I went traveling and I saw the world and did all this stuff to try and find myself because I had this restlessness. I just had to get away. And that didn't really fix anything. it was just like running away. But there was this moment on the top of a mountain right at the end of my second trip when I was thinking, crap, I've got to go home and I don't feel any different. And I was trekking by myself in New Zealand, got to the top of this mountain, had this incredible, it was like I ran out of thoughts and my brain stopped. And I know for most trauma survivors, it's like constantly. My brain stopped. And I had this moment of utter, just this, my higher self came in and just went, yep, you're on the right track. Just this incredible kind of sense of peace and connection with everything. And it was so the opposite of gaslighting, which I'd never really come across before. Like, you're on the right track, you're heading towards this natural therapies path. Yes to all of it. Yes. And I was like, whoa. So when I got back, I made sure I started studying and became a naturopath. And I was really attracted to the natural therapies, even though I had no idea, because I was I grew up in such a conventional family. But there was just this, it was almost like a compass needle constantly kind of pushing me towards this thing that I didn't know about. And then I came across, through my travels in naturopathy, I came across homeopathy. And from the first time I started hearing about it, I was like, wow, this just really speaks to how I'm trying to heal from my traumas. Because in homeopathy, they see the immune system on all the levels, not just the physical, but the emotional, mental levels. And sometimes it's referred to as the psychiatry of the natural therapies, which I love. And I also love that when I sit down with a woman, I primarily see women. I don't need to go into their traumas. They don't need to come in and tell me this happened at this time and that happened at that time. What I want to know is, how are you sitting with that trauma today? And yes, how has it affected you in the past? What's your inner story? Not necessarily what happened to you. How have you processed that trauma and how has it made an impact on your life today? And I find that that's really refreshing, because then I don't, if they want to tell me, I'm very happy to listen to it. But a lot of the time I know people don't want to go back there and just trawl around in it, which I think really ties in with what you're talking about with working on finding a pathway through to that other side where there are little glimmers of joy and peace and awesomeness in life.
I love it. Wow, what an incredible story. First of all, trekking through New Zealand on my bucket list. So I'm already very jealous of you for that. So explain a little bit about what homeopathy, I don't say it the way you do. I definitely love your way of saying it better. But what exactly is homeopathy for people that don't know what that is?
Yeah. So I'll give you the elevator pitch because it's so complicated. But
Yes.
basically, when a person comes in, I ask them all kinds of weird and wonderful questions, and they're weird. They're really, really weird. I take that narrative, and there are probably around 8,000 remedies in the homeopathic materia medica, but we probably primarily deal with maybe 500 of them commonly, and there's different potencies. It's basically an energy medicine, but each person resonates with a particular type of energy, I suppose you would say. Like, no two people get a cold in the same way. So you can have a similar diagnosis, let's call it, I don't know, ADHD, we were talking about that before, that no two people will have the same ADHD. So yes, they'll still tick similar criteria, but how do you do ADHD? What's underneath it? What are the kind of patterns that are manifesting out to bring about that state in you? And then we go underneath. Okay, tell me about how that feels in your body. What are the sensations that you've got going on in your body? Some people can't answer that, and we have to kind of, go at it from a different pathway. What are the kind of understandings or the kind of narratives and beliefs that you've had as a result of however you were treated? All of that kind of thing. And I love getting really deep and going into what's underneath. What's motivating that person to behave that way. So it is a little bit kind of psychological. And what we do with our however many remedies that we've got in our dispensary is that each remedy has a profile of symptoms. So it's not necessarily this remedy for that condition. It's this remedy for that type of person. Almost like, when you look at astrology and each astrological sign has a range of features to it, but it's in much more detail in the homeopathic remedies. And so my job is to recognize patterns in people and match them up to a remedy. What that does is help to stimulate the immune system in a really specific way, in a really complex way, to help that person's immune system kind of wake up and go, I'm supposed to be doing something about that bit and that bit. And a lot of the time it kind of falls under the radar. And that's kind of what we see chronic disease as, is this inability of the immune system and all those levels to be able to rise up to the occasion and deal with what's going on. Because as we know, trauma is overwhelming and it really stuffs up that balance. And then we almost don't have a proper immune system on the emotional mental level to be able to recognize when there's a threat, because for whatever reason, whether it's through conditioning, through years of abuse or whatever, it's like we've switched that off, that danger signal, or we've switched off our ability to be able to act in danger. And that takes quite a long time to, and lots of treatments. I'm not just talking about homeopathy, but you know, what you do somatic wise sounds amazing, to be able to reconnect those pathways so that we can adequately respond in right relationship to the world again.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh, mind blown. So, talk a little bit more about, and this is the part that I find really fascinating. So, I'm going to geek out a little bit on science here, but how, and this is I'm asking a very broad question, and I understand that. How does trauma impact the immune system more than just kind of turning it off? Like, what are some common symptoms you see physically or emotionally, mentally in people who are having an imbalance in their immune system? Like, what are you looking for in people so that listeners who are listening might be like, oh gosh, I have that. Oh, wait, I have that too. Because we were
Yeah.
kind of talking about that earlier, and I was like, oh my God, I have that. Yep, I have that too.
Yeah, so I'll come from the physical level first.
Yeah.
And this is also why I became a nutritionist and a herbalist, because I wanted to also support those physical level symptoms. So you've got this really close intertwinement, right, between the nervous system and the hormonal system and the immune system and the gut and everything bloody else. So you know that thing with trauma. Right. You've got this resetting, I suppose, of structures and neurotransmitters and everything in the brain, so that now our filters are wired for danger, danger, danger. And when you've had big traumas, or when we've had big traumas, because me too, we see the world differently through a different filter. And what that does is retrain our whole system. We're not meant to live under such chronic trauma conditions. So now, rather than just a fight flight reaction to real threat, we're now reacting like that to everything
Mhm.
because it's a perceived threat. Maybe not everything, but you know, our bodies are constantly set at this higher level of reactivity. So what that does is, first of all, just looking at it from the digestive system perspective, when we're stressed, you've heard about that story. There's some fable with the three kids that were lined up and one of them was guilty, and the tribal chief knew that this kid was guilty because they got them all to suck on a pebble, and the kid who was guilty, his pebble was dry, right? That's because he was so stressed out he couldn't even produce saliva. And that's what happens. We can't produce our digestive secretions. So our saliva, our stomach acid, all of our digestive enzymes, all of that kind of stuff goes out the window. So you might think, oh, well, whatever, low stomach acid, big deal. Most people have that. But if you don't have high enough stomach acid, then you don't kill off all the bacteria and microbes that come in through our food. We're not digesting our stuff properly, and then we get this gloppage, which I know is a very scientific term, of gas and stuff back up, and then we're more prone to reflux, and then we think that we've got a high stomach acid, so then we knock it out further with antacids. Not only that, once it has a flow-on effect through the whole gut, which messes with our microbes, our beneficial gut flora. So that messes with our with our immune system, because the gut is where the immune system really is at. It also messes with our ability to digest properly, and then we start getting inflammation in the gut, because all of those mechanisms that help protect us from the outside world start to break down, and when we get inflammation, then we start getting what I call leaky gut, and a lot of a lot of scientific kind of mainstream people will say that's a load of shite, but actually what happens is the enterocytes lining the gut should be held together by tight junctions, these little cells lining the gut, so that we've got a nice smooth lining. But when the enterocytes start to break down with those tight junctions between them, there are gaps. And there shouldn't be gaps. That means that bigger molecules pass through those gaps and into our bloodstream. So safe foods that we should normally have going through the enterocytes instead of through the gaps are now larger. Those molecules are larger than what normally comes straight into the bloodstream. And our immune system doesn't know what to do with it and thinks it's foreign. So it starts attacking it. So that leads us up for potential allergies, but not just allergies, because there are different antibodies involved in immune attacking of these compounds, right? And some of them are a little bit slower than the IgE, which is our typical allergy. So then you get reactions and we don't know what we're reacting to because it comes up later. And then we've got this situation where everything's in inflammation and the gut and the immune system are so linked. This is when we start getting things like autoimmune and parasites and you name it, and our immune system starts to break down. And when you look at how it is on the emotional mental level, most of us have grown up with a lot of gaslighting. We've been told that reality is a particular way. And then when we try and challenge that reality, we get told that we're the problem. So you can imagine what that's like for our system. It's almost like we're in this battle zone between, but this is reality for me. No, it's not, And so we kind of take that on and it becomes this battle. So I'm not surprised that autoimmune is such a big deal in trauma survivors, because we're often constantly at battle with ourselves. And so when we're thinking, this is not safe, I'm not safe in this situation, we've often been conditioned to tell ourselves, yes, we're safe, because we've been told that we're safe, even though we're not safe. Not only that, because we're so reactive all the time to this constant kind of micro traumas that are not really traumas, we're just reacting as though they are. So we kind of do have to gaslight ourselves just to get through a day without overreacting, in inverted commas. You know what I mean? So we have to it's this double gaslighting. The world has gaslit us to think that we're safe when we're not. And now we have to gaslight ourselves. Otherwise, we're having big meltdowns in the middle of public, domain and all of that. And it's not very socially acceptable.
Oh my gosh, you said so many things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to go here. I want to go here. So the analogy, I love the talking about how it really impacts inflammation, trauma. And I'm going to even say, yes, big traumas, capital T. I talk a lot and I work with women a lot who have traumas, lowercase t, that are kind of that indefinable, nothing big happened. So it's kind of like, did I really experience trauma? But that gaslighting still puts your nervous system into that. I describe it like a car, and you're in neutral and you're stepping on the gas and you're just always going. And if you're always going, of course your body's going to start to break down. Chronic pain happens, autoimmune disorders, leaky gut, all sorts of GI problems. And then it just kind of, they compound. And then it gets harder and harder when your body's feeling like shit to be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get up and go do something that makes me feel good today, because you already feel like shit. And then you do have to gaslight yourself into, no, I'm fine. Nothing really is going on. So I think that's a beautiful way that you describe it. And for me, I think of it as trauma and stress, and that gaslighting, all of that is like your car in neutral and you're always stepping on the gas. Of course, things are going to start to break down. And that trauma healing journey is learning how to take your foot off the gas pedal in ways that feel safe and let your body, your car readjust and settle down. And then it's going to start working a whole lot better.
And sometimes that means overreacting to things and having people look at you and go, what's wrong with her? Just to allow yourself to feel like you've got a little bit of personal power, so you've got to enter somewhere into that.
Absolutely. So how do you work with women, especially who are feeling uncomfortable in their body? Because, we're talking about how trauma impacts the gut, the inflammation, all of that. And then we also have that emotional and that mental side of society saying we have to look a certain way, we have to act a certain way, we have to feel a certain way, and we don't get permission to be or to be tired or to any of those things. So how do you, as a naturopath and a homeopathic provider, help with that?
There's no magic bullet.
Okay,
Uh,
yep, good answer.
tell you that first up, and it involves a bit of work, and it involves sometimes getting the person reducing their addictive habits, but refilling, like, you're giving that habit up or maybe reducing it a little bit, but you're refilling it with this.
Hmm.
And I think that's the key is, that thing, we can't cope very much with empty space.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think a lot of us trauma survivors, we need to have that filling, that sensation of filling up, filling up. So I think for me, what I try and do is help the person by, just something as simple as magnesium and zinc. Right? If you've got
Hmm.
a deranged nervous system that's going off at the drop of a hat, zinc is really good for stomach acid and nervous system function. And also, I don't know if you've heard of pyrrole disorder, but it's a disorder that often gets switched on after trauma, and it results in ridiculously low levels of zinc. And one of the problems with low levels of zinc is that copper is then able to rise. And copper is a neurotoxin and it causes people to feel really, really wired. And, they can't sleep and they have all these problems with, that kind of feeling of unease in their system. So something as simple as, and I've seen this with childhood behavior over and over again, a lot of these kids, you give them zinc and magnesium and, a good quality B complex and some other minerals to help with methylation, which is like detoxing and just allowing some of those biochemical processes to run properly. And it's not mind blowing for most people, but it just gives them a little bit of a grounding. And also that thing with blood sugar, right? You might think, oh, yeah, whatever, blood sugar. But if you don't have enough protein in your system and fat, right? And all these people trying to lose weight and, dropping meat and fat and all of that kind of thing. And when you're low in zinc, you don't feel like meat. And then so you just eat vegetarian and you're not getting enough protein and your copper's just spiraling through the roof. Um, a low blood sugar moment looks a little bit like a panic attack when you think about it. Lightheaded, sweating. Our bodies secrete stress hormones when we're low blood sugar, right? So just those basics. Eat when you're hungry and don't just eat carby shit. Eat protein and fat and anchor yourself down. When you need to do a wee, you go and do a wee. When you need to do a poo, you go and do a poo. We hold it and we hold it because we're busy and then our systems go into fight flight just with those basic survival things. And those things are not hard to implement.
Oh my God, I love that you just said that. I worked as a registered nurse for many years. Well, I still
Oh,
work sometimes
yes,
as a registered nurse. And it's
yes,
almost a competition to see who can go 12 hours without going to the bathroom. And
yes,
I got to a point, I was like, I'm not doing that. People can wait for me to go to the bathroom. I got to
yes,
go take care of me for just a minute. And so you're right. Something as simple as, I love how you said it, going wee or going poo is taking care of your body's physiologic needs. I don't think that so often when we talk trauma, we're talking just like the mental and the emotional aspect of it, but there's a real physical aspect to trauma and to that stress
yeah,
hormone and all of that. I love that you said that. And it's interesting talking about protein. I decided I was going to go vegetarian to try and be healthier. And I tried it
yeah,
and I had even less energy.
yes,
I felt terrible. I gained weight and
yeah,
my protein levels went down. I just didn't have that energy. And so I'm with you. I had to start putting more protein, more fat into my diet, and I felt better. I felt like I had more energy. And so something as simple as not, recognizing that your body might not be meant for a vegetarian diet because you might need a little more protein than that.
yes,
Oh my gosh, I'm mind blown. I'm loving what we're talking about. Trauma is such a complex factor that impacts us in so many different ways that we don't always realize. I hadn't even thought that a low blood sugar could manifest as a panic attack. Think of when you
yeah,
get hangry. Most of us have experienced episodes of being hangry, that irritability, that restlessness, that like you're going to blow up at any moment. And imagine your blood
Yes,
sugar dropping even lower. So
yes,
I love that. That's beautiful. How does trauma impact our endocrine system or our hormones? And what are some of
yeah.
the things, common ones that you see? Because I also don't think people realize how closely intertwined those are.
Oh, they're so closely intertwined because you've got like the brain structures responsible for that whole stress response are also responsible for regulating hormones. So, the hypothalamus, the boss gland, the big CEO of the whole company, that will take a little taste of your blood and go, we've got stress hormones. We better dial back some of these other life processes, AKA rest and digest, and produce babies. All of those things are secondary to survival. So if you've got this survival thing running, means that your hormone balance is secondary to your stress hormones, which means, and especially for women, that thing in the first part of their cycle when a woman is still menstruating, estrogen is kind of the main star of the show then. If there's a lot of stress and a woman can't ovulate, and this is just one example, because often what happens is if the estrogen can't get high enough, obviously all the other hormones, you won't ovulate. But you need ovulation to happen in order for that second cycle to be able to have enough progesterone to tide you through. And often what happens is the progesterone kind of bottoms out in that second half of the cycle, which is why we get the sore boobs, the PMT, which is premenstrual tension, all of that kind of stuff, heavy periods, because we've got unopposed estrogen now. And even if the estrogen isn't high enough to mount ovulation because we're super stressed, it's still higher than progesterone. And when you get high estrogen, which is also what happens after a woman turns 35 and her progesterone just goes, and
Mhm.
especially it's worse when you've got this chronic stress thing going on. Progesterone is the first thing to drop because it's got a common precursor to cortisol. So everything will get shunted into cortisol instead of progesterone. Progesterone is our happy hormone. It's protective of inflammation. It's really important for maintaining the gut microbiome, all of that kind of thing. So when we've got low progesterone, we suffer in so many different ways. We get cranky, our blood sugar goes out the window, balance, our gut health. When you get bloated and you just feel like utter shit in your gut and you can't eat anything because everything, all your protective stuff has gone. So just looking at it from that point of view is huge. And then when we go through menopause, when you stop ovulating, obviously that progesterone just hits rock bottom. We're meant to be able to provide that from our adrenals and a little bit from leftover from the ovaries and the uterus and all that kind of thing. But yeah, our adrenals are absolutely important. And the adrenal glands are supposed to keep us alive, secreting adrenaline and cortisol and all of that kind of thing. But they also have a little bit of a progesterogenic sort of effect, especially that takes over in perimenopause and menopause. If we're super stressed and our adrenals are totally drained, we can't do that. So, all those women who are going through all of this chronic stress and then they get to that 35 onwards age and all of a sudden things just go to shit. Their mood just is terrible. They've got these terribly sore breasts. They've got horrible heavy periods. um, all of that kind of thing is a sign of severe adrenal fatigue. And often women will come with thyroid issues because if you're low in a whole bunch of your minerals and your stomach acid's out and your immune system's just going to hell. Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, as well as just low thyroid function because you're low in iron and zinc and magnesium and iodine and all of this, selenium, all of the things that you need to make thyroid hormone. All of that stuff's going to start to happen. And the weight gain, I know there's a little bit of weight gain that's needed in perimenopause and menopause to maintain bone health and all of that kind of thing. But I'm talking about energy just going through the floor, brain fog, swelling, horrible blood, all of that stuff is a sign of nervous system dysfunction, which is now flowing out into every single other system. So the nervous system is the central core of what we need to kind of be working on.
Fascinating. Oh my gosh. I knew trauma impacted the body, but I guess I didn't realize just how many different ways. And it's so insidious and so kind of sneaky in that it's impacting our bodies in ways we didn't even realize or recognize. And so, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. I'm loving it. So my question for you, Penny, is as you were on your healing journey, how did you find lightness? Because, it hasn't been talked about very much. It wasn't something, I started 10 years ago and there weren't a whole lot of people talking about you get to have joy as you're on it. So,
Yeah.
what were things for you that you found along the way that helped you find some of that lightness or that lack of heaviness to keep going? Because it's hard when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's hard when it's uncomfortable. At first it was drugs and alcohol.
I'm not discounting that. I did that too. Yep.
I'm proud to admit that that was in my early 20s. I was really hedonistic. And it was kind of like that, screw that shit. I'm not gonna, I've been through hell. I'm gonna give myself a good time, which then just made it worse.
Yeah,
There
I did
was
the
this,
same thing, so I can relate.
yeah, there was this little sense though, and I think what I noticed about all of that stuff was that when I was drunk or when I was on these things, whatever it was, trips or whatever, there was this part of me that felt right. And I was like, what's all that about? And it wasn't quite right because the drugs and the alcohol were not a natural way of achieving that. And I didn't like that bit that I had to screw my body up so much. But there was just this little sense, something guiding me along to my body doesn't feel right. I want to feel right. And it did lead me to a meditation group as well. And I've found through the meditation that also leads to that feeling of rightness. But I think there's this little guide in all of us of that centeredness, of that calm, of that peace. And also finding your people around you, which means being honest about your kookiness, I think. And I think most trauma survivors will have a fair bit of kookiness that they need to be able to express safely in order to be able to feel accepted. And I think that's where the key is finding that environment and the people and your tribe to be able to just be as kooky as you want to and have them celebrate it. And that's what I found. I was with the wrong people at first.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed drugs and alcohol in my 20s because I wasn't discerning enough about the people I surrounded myself with. And those people seemed to not like me being me. And I realized there's actually nothing wrong with me. Yes, maybe I'm a little bit 11 out of 10 sometimes, but I found as I went on and, that those people dropped off, or I just went, no, I can't be with you because I feel so stifled when I'm around you. And I've since just very gradually cultivated some people around me, my very close people who celebrate me for me. And I can go out to breakfast and we offend all the people around us. And we have the biggest laugh. Like we piss ourselves laughing and we're so stupid. And I think that is the key to be able to do that also with yourself. I walk around
Yes.
the house muttering. I yell at the dog. I don't know, the kids, I get stupid with the kids. And just to find those little opportunities, it's almost like being your own parent. Okay, Penny, it's time to go empty your bladder. It's time to eat. Let's play a little game now. Let's do something stupid. Let's line the bath with lots of Epsom salts and a, smutty book or something. Just little things. They're little. We don't have to go on massive holidays. We don't have to do whatever. It's just, looking at life and sometimes going, fuck you.
Absolutely. It is. In fact,
Yeah.
for me, it's so funny that you say going fuck you to life. I grew up in a very fundamental Christian household where we
Yeah.
did not swear. I could not say swear words. And so one of the things for me on my healing journey was being able to say fuck you. I mean, that was
Yes.
just like this huge release of stored energy and stored trauma. And I would just say fuck for no reason. And And then I'd start to giggle like this little child who just did something wrong. And it was this opportunity. So I love that you're saying it doesn't have to be anything big. Read a smutty novel. Yep, embrace that part of yourself, because that's there for all
Yes.
of us.
And also, just a word on rage. You know that thing where, as females, rage is so taboo. And I think finding ways to make rage funny so that you can have your little tantrum. Like I had a pancake rage the other day because I was making pancakes and it didn't work out. And I was in the kitchen and I was like, it didn't work out. And I just had this like little stompy thing while I was making the pancakes. And my daughter looked at me like, ugh. But I wasn't hurting anyone. And I think that's the thing, is finding ways to have those, and at work, I've got these lovely co-workers where I'll walk in sometimes and, for fuck's sake, I can't believe that person fucking, and then, okay, we're good now. And then I'll be able, and work out a way to work through rage without taking it out on anybody. And then it's not sitting in your system. And if you need to have the odd little tanty over, I don't know, computers, or if you're driving or whatever, and then let it out of your system, and then you're good without taking it out on anyone. It's so freeing to be able to do that.
100%. In fact, I encourage my clients as we're working through like that emotional discomfort and angsty, say a swear word, say it, do it, get it out, get it
Yeah.
out. And it's interesting to me how many women are unable to even let that angsty anger, irritability out. Even with the swear word, it gets very uncomfortable. And so
Yes.
I'm a huge fan. Swear as much as you want when it's appropriate. Obviously, there are times where you really should not be, we do need to control that. But when you're in
Yes.
a safe environment, let it out. Throw that temper tantrum. Absolutely. I do that regularly. So I definitely relate to that.
And also train your friends and your loved ones so that you can have those little, I call them tanty moments.
I love it.
And, my daughter, because I said to her later, how was that little tantrum for you? Because you looked a bit shocked. And I didn't take any of it out on her. I was just like really off in the moment. And she said, no, that was fine. I just wouldn't mind like a little warning. So we worked out, that's fine. Okay. So we worked out a little series of events beforehand. And I said to her, I'm not sure I'll be up for words when I'm feeling that pissed off, but what about a little as a warning? So that then I can have, that kind of thing.
That's
Yeah.
That's so powerful. And then that also helps you to separate out your tribe, those people who can accept what you need in order to heal, versus people who are like, nope, that's weird, don't ever do that around me again. Okay, well, you're not a safe person for me to be around. That discerning way to help to find that tribe of people who
The
love you.
reparenting of your self process, I think. It's, being very nurturing but stern at the same time, and saying, no, those people aren't good for me. And just having that ability to have that higher authority to go, yes, this is what we need right now.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Penny, I could talk for hours, and to respect your time, and because I could talk for hours about this. I obviously love this subject, and I think you bring such an interesting approach to it, which is more, yes, I get that you do the emotional, mental, and all of that, but I don't think people really understand the physical toll that trauma, chronic stress addiction, all of that takes on our bodies, and how it is such a multifaceted approach to healing trauma. And it's not just wishing it away. We get to take actions, and something simple as zinc and magnesium, like you mentioned, can be incredibly beneficial. I am going to say, maybe don't go out and just start taking zinc and magnesium. Consult with somebody and make sure that really is what your body needs, because like,
and there are types of zinc and magnesium that are pathetic, and they're actually probably quite, they can be harmful. So make sure you see somebody to work out what's best.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so Penny, I'm going to ask you my two questions that I ask everybody at the end of an interview. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything about your healing journey, if anything at all, what would you change?
Yes. So the first thing I thought of was that if I could change anything about my healing journey, the people who were toxic in my life, who I put up with for years and years and years, I would find different ways to cut them out of my life way earlier and not put up with their shit for so long.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Once we realize how toxic people are and how much better our life is without them, it's almost when I cut toxic relationships out of my life, I was like, oh my gosh, I can breathe. I can actually
Yes.
physically breathe. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And then, so the next question is, if we were to sit down and talk in 12 months, where would you want your healing journey to be that it's not now?
That one was a little bit trickier to kind of imagine, but I would say I have been kind of looking my whole life for peace.
Mm.
And I've to some degree found it, but I would like to be way further along on that in 12 months' time towards the point where I can be at peace without that whir of thoughts in my head. And I get moments of that peace when I'm meditating, when I'm doing whatever. But I would love to be way further along in that process.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's my goal too, is I want more peace in my body. Mhm.
Yes.
All right. Well, how, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yes. So obviously I'm Australian. I live in Sydney and I work at a clinic in Sydney, obviously, but I also do online stuff. So the website is www.hhcc.com.au and it's called the Harbord Homeopathic Clinic. That's where I work and I see women and children as well for behavioural issues. I also teach homeopathy at a college in Australia as well on some of the other days and supervise student clinics. So, I mean, yeah, that's probably, unless you're wanting to study, that might be a little bit out of reach. But yeah, if you're looking for more support, the clinic's probably the best way to go. And I can pop some details up on whatever you've got there.
Fantastic. And we'll drop a link for that in the show notes. And are you on social media? Is there a way if people want to follow you? How do people reach out that way?
Yeah, Penny Barron Homeopath.
Okay, we'll
It's
drop.
just
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, that's it. And then I've also got like an author page because I do a little bit of writing and I pop things up on there as well. That's on Instagram and it's called just Penny Barron Author. So there's Penny Barron Author on Instagram and then Penny Barron Homeopath on Facebook.
Fantastic. We'll drop all those links in the show notes. So definitely go check her out, reach out. If anything that she said kind of struck with you today, because my brain is definitely swirling after talking to her, reach out, contact her. She is brilliant. For those of you that have not seen her or watching this on the audio, she just has this amazing, incredible energy about her. So go check her out, go connect with her. And also, I'm including in the show notes a free, short, less than 5 minute movement sequence that you can do. It's a playful movement sequence. When you feel like you need to throw your own temper tantrum and aren't quite sure how to start doing it, go check it out because it is a great way to help you start to get into that act of being able and feeling comfortable throwing a temper tantrum because as adults, it can be incredibly challenging. So go grab that as well. Start to use playful movement to shift some of that out and learn how to regulate your nervous system. And so you can start to heal a lot of this physical aspect that we've been talking about today. So, Penny, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being a guest. And you are amazing. Everybody go connect with her because she's fabulous. And until next time, I hope y'all are having an amazing day and find some peace along the way of your journey. See you next time.
Thank you, Angie.
Thanks, Penny.